You're listening to Radio Free Satan. Enjoy the show.
I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Moon piercing the night. Through the trees the damsel in distress comes, breaking through the underbrush, fear painted on her face. The darkness hunting her is near. She waits in the swamp, water slowing her escape. The creature nears, the damsel turns, hands rising to her sides as a last-ditch effort to thrust the creature back. Welcome to Creature Feature.
Welcome to another Creature Feature. Today I'm being joined by none other than Draconis Blackthorne, the man behind Blackthorne Productions and The Devil's Diary. How are you? And thank you so much for joining me today.
Very well, Adam, and how are you this night on Krampusnacht?
Yeah, I'm doing quite well. I was wondering if maybe we could start this with a reading of your poem that you released, the Krampusnacht poem.
Certainly. Okay, Krampusnacht. On Krampusnacht, the Krampus comes forth, ringing thine bell from out of the darkness, resounding from hell. Displaying thy rictus, switchel in hand, a demonic vision now walks the land. On Krampusnacht. Krampi of every shape, color, and size, a devil's procession you will fire in their eyes. A messenger of nightmarish fame, this bearded beast with horn-crowned mane on Krampusnacht. Villagers cower with whispered prayers, fearsome shadows cast with dusk to bring the night, torches aflame with scent of brimstone's pyre, and some will vanish into the thine black embrace, a thorny gash, a scion's choir on Krampusnacht.
Nice. And that was an original, right?
Of course, definitely.
That's awesome.
I also created an image for it and sort of created a mixture of multimedia combinations here.
That's great. Yeah, I'm looking at the post you put in Facebook right now, and it's presumably Krampus behind a scroll and everything. It looks really nice. Thank
you. I first found out about Krampusnacht about 4 or 5 years ago. I was wondering why that character wasn't included in some of these Santa-like processions, and thought a balance perhaps needed to be provided. And for, I guess, children, perhaps they would behave themselves a little better, or perhaps could make a friend out of the Krampus, depending upon their disposition, hypothetically, of course.
Yeah. And it's funny, I actually was just introduced to it, I believe, last year for the first time. And I actually saw, there's some videos on YouTube and stuff where there's reenactments and in some cities in Europe, I guess. Interesting stuff. I mean, for sure, if you've never been exposed to it before, get out there and look it up. But a great poem nonetheless by Draconis Blackthorne. How about we dive right into this interview here? I would like to talk to you about Blackthorne Productions, about some of your the work that you do, some of the projects, and of which there are many. But first, let's find out a little bit about the man behind these projects, behind Blackthorne Productions. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I initially joined the Infernal Empire in about a year 27, and thought that for all that time I had seen various portrayals of the Church and Dr. LaVey. So I thought that when the time came and I was able to join, I went straight away into it with, both horns forward. And since then, I thought I would like to bring something to the table. So all these ideas that I had previously, I started to place them into more of a structured form. So they're basically things of the time I may have not have seen, or I considered it was inspirational from what others were doing. So along with that, of course, contributing to various publications that were in existence. However, in bringing some of the members forward into my various projects, and they've been very gracious to have participated in these as well, particularly the Devil's Diary, which I was able to place them all together, these essays and contributions, into a book named The Devil's Diaries. And so far it has gotten some great responses, wonderful participants and inclusions. And so in regards to the Infernal Empire, since I initiated Blackthorne Productions, it has remained a constant flow of creativity and expression for myself and others. And so along with these, of course, there were some of the black arts and witchcrafts, as it were, which were the various traditional oracles, shall we say, which most Satanists now would regard as more or less as works of art, or perhaps, experimentation for those so inclined. And it works on both fronts. I created the Satan's Ouija to resonate, say, aesthetically to Satanic perspective.
Yeah.
As well as a variation on the runes with original creations, symbols implemented therein upon black rock, and perhaps eventually, if demand grows for it, perhaps obsidian, as I believe Magister Barton suggested in the Church of Satan book, as well as tarot cards, perhaps, are another long-standing goal that I eventually probably will put together. And basically accessing all these various traditional practices in the occult and modifying them to, shall we say, more personal, thereby satanic meaning to the individual. Each individual each Satanist is vastly different, and an individual that we are like-minded at times.
Yeah.
But still, definitely, it has received very interesting results. From my personal experimentations, I've seen, at least in accent, a bit of a little bit of a push to some of the our innate instinctual attributes. And of course, and there's the magazine, which itself, which I'm very proud to put forth every Walpurgisnacht and Halloween, and the Shadow Gallery calendar, which I initiated 2 years ago to access some of my artwork, and as well as poetry.
Wow. In
a visual form, and which of course can be supplemented by the book Satanic Serenades, which I was very happy to have collaborated with musician Dorian Gray, also one of us, who did a marvelous, magnificent job with these orchestrations, and as well as his own projects are quite remarkable as well. And
you are just involved in so much. Let me ask you. I can identify with this, a cult background that it seems that you have come from. Just the runes and the Ouija board and the future tarot card, the poetry and music and everything. This is sort of a culture that a lot of us have in common. Certainly not all of us, but a lot of us do.
An occulture, as it were.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So, do you think? I find a lot of people sort of shake loose those occult avenues, we'll say, like the Ouija board, and sort of focus a little bit more on magical trappings, the way Anton LaVey has really sort of pointed it out in the Satanic Bible, I'll say. What do you think the reasons are that you decided to bring back and add a decidedly satanic spin on something, for example, like the Ouija board?
Well, it's more of a psychological analysis. The Ouija board, things of that nature, I've found to be accessing a Jungian dark side within oneself. Mm-hmm. As long as perspective is attained and you don't consider this as an external force telling you what to do or lead your life, but it's essentially these are tools mm-hmm. with which to exercise your dark side. And whether or not one gleans the purported results or not, they do serve to focus one's goals, perhaps, or to sharpen one's innate senses, or shall we say instinct. Just a bit more. You practice anything and you get better and better at it. So it's overall, it's more or less an art form. It's more or less an aesthetic presentation, more so than perhaps a storybook or a movie variation of what it could or should be. Mm-hmm. So it's basically, if people are going to play the devil's game, so to speak, then it should be given the devil's name, and that's nice. Basically what this has become for me.
And I actually really like that take on it. It doesn't really matter whether I like it or not, but I identify with that take on it. I have actually made my own Ouija board years ago, before I identified myself as a Satanist, and I used it for that very purpose, more of a psychological tool of evening out my different crazy emotions that any kid has growing up. So using it like that, I think, is a very it's a very educated way of taking on the occult and stripping away sort of the absurd, spiritual side of it. Precisely. But what I like at the same time is that we can still use that aesthetic. Even though we rationalize and we accept reality and we accept the authority that our subconscious has on the actualization of results, it's almost like being a kid again for a minute, at least for me, going back to that time when magic was not understood and things were genuinely scary and
right.
It's great. So I'm really glad to see that someone's sort of carrying that torch that so many others have dropped.
Well, these are the psychodramas which stimulate the emotions to power drive the actualization of your desires.
Yeah.
Magic is the key to materialization, combined with effort, of course. And you combine all these factors in the same spirit, so to speak, in the ritual chamber. You go forth, and it becomes an intellectual decompression chamber. Very much these types of tools can be accessed in that manner. So Dr. LaVey mentioned, you look upon the Baphomet, and it represents yourself. Only in a visual form in order to stimulate your emotions. Mm. And very much the same way these tools can be recognized as such. It's a mirror, a reflection of what you are putting forth, and you're feeding off your own energy. And thus it helps you, in my opinion, to sharpen certain goals, perhaps to add an extra bit of perspective on what you may not have seen commonly. It's a very, very good form of meditation, as it were, focusing on your goals. So it's very atheistic in that sense. it's both atheistic and atheistic, but definitely it definitely proceeds from oneself. Absolutely.
Nice. So let me talk a little bit more about Blackthorne Productions as a construct here. So you didn't start it until you joined the Church of Satan. Is that correct?
Correct.
And your idea was to promote what well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You did it to share ideas and thoughts and products, correct?
Absolutely. My own and whoever else wants to participate.
That's nice. What I often find when looking at different production environments or producers is that they genuinely focus on one media or one avenue of artistic expression. I think you're breaking that mold because you have a lot of different things. You got poetry, you've got essays, artwork, music collaboration. So, what is it about Blackthorne Productions that makes it so varied that you want to not just focus on one thing like music or like books or like artwork, for example, and that you want to offer so many different media under one tent?
Well, show business is the devil's realm, and I thought these are things I've been doing prior to creating Blackthorne Productions, and more or less for personal amusement, so might as well create it and go forward in a structured form, along with the to contribute to the organization. There's some things that are created here are a little bit better than others, or sometimes it hits and so forth. But everything I do try to put forth, at least towards my satisfaction, seems to have been appreciated, and perhaps that is what is the ratifying point to how many different avenues should be accessed, right. And it'll keep on happening as long as these creations are seen as the value of some sort. It starts with oneself, and of course complementary analysis or observation is very much appreciated.
Now, you have a lot of projects out there, and in doing some research for this interview, I found it challenging to navigate through all of your different works. So for people interested, where can they go to find out about the various offerings that Blackthorne Productions has? On the Shadowmantium website. It's shadowmantium.com. It's everything's basically available there, and you can purchase right on the website or go to the book publishers. There's like Lulu, or go to the music song stall. It's but basically there's a Blackthorne Productions page proper available there on, as well as see the updates, the evolutions, which it's an little Enochian banner, and go on there, and it'll take you to what's been going on month by month. Wow. Yeah, I have noticed the blog, and I noticed that you're also on Facebook, often sharing old movies and reviews and your own personal works. So, for anyone out there interested, certainly check out the social networks and find out what Blackthorne Productions is up to. And it's always something new, and it's a lot of different things. Let's talk about Devil's Diary. Certainly, if we can, for a moment here. When did you first start that, and what provoked you? I mean, what was sort of the genesis of the Devil's Diary? The Devil's Diary, before it was the Devil's Diary, I called it Noctuary. This was a magazine I had been tossing around in my head before the church, before I joined the church. And however, like I said again, that Devil's Diary basically was a concentrated magazine for the Infernal Empire. However, so it evolved out of that, which was basically more of a horror magazine. Horror mostly, multimedia,
And the essays began coming forth, and I took several classes on small business management and journalism, and decided, why not create something here that the Infernal Empire perhaps would appreciate. And so I just did it, and sent the copy or two to administration, and they seem to have liked it, and have since included it on the news page upon each release.
Yeah.
And which is, of course, a great honor. And the Genesis, it was a pre-magazine before it turned into the Devil's Diary.
Nice.
And so it has been.
Now, you already mentioned that you have sort of a biannual release schedule, so Walpurgisnacht and Halloween, is that correct?
Correct.
What was the idea behind that? To do it twice a year rather than maybe once a quarter or once a year? Or?
Initially, I received so much submissions that I decided it would be appropriate to put it out twice a year. In the beginning, the magazines were sometimes 45 to 50 plus pages, so I decided to just split them in half with appropriately themed releases for the whole holidays. And it just seems to work that way, since a lot occurs in that period between which seems to be most Satanists' favorite holidays, besides one's birthday, of course. And it's all encompassing. And I love Halloween. And of course, in honor of Walpurgisnacht being the foundation of our organization, I thought these were the two perfect holidays to release them, since there's so much resonance with so many of us.
Nice. We'll talk about how people can get their hands on this in a little bit. I'd like to talk a little bit of marketing here on the Devil's Diary side here. So what do you think that the Devil's Diary offers that other publications don't? What does the Devil's Diary brings to the table, so to speak, that really should whet the appetite of your target market?
Just the sheer combination of content that's on there. Another inspiration was in the beginning when I was putting forth my website, I had a lot that I would have available just for people to peruse online. So all these different sections, which were the essays and all the different multimedia, personal relations, adventures, experiments, etc. So it became, poetry. It became a wide spectrum. So to concentrate it all in one place, instead of having them there, but to have a print variation. And of course, since then, the Shadowmantium website has moved on to a more concise form since 2 Halloweens ago. And again, it seemed to it is appreciated by those that I respect. Mm-hmm. And thus it's a motivating factor. So what I bring to the table, I feel, is a wide variety, mostly. Yes.
And so, I mean, I would go out on a limb here and say that Satanists are going to be the target market.
Yes.
Do you make any effort to reach out to any other audience?
Not necessarily. Not with the Devil's Diary.
Yeah.
I have received some correspondence from a couple of non-Satanists, and they seem to appreciate it for what it is. Of course, they may not agree with everything. However, they can appreciate perhaps the work or the perspectives, and it could also serve as an educational tool. If anyone gets their hands on it, I actually took a psychology of religion class and asked to bring in some literature of our particular religions. And I thought, well, I might as well bring my own in.
Yeah.
And the instructor, as well as most other students who were a little bit more open-minded, of course, were taken aback that there was these expressions that were not the horror movie variations, of course, in literal form.
Yeah.
But they could definitely appreciate or understand, at least, that we appreciate trappings, many of the trappings, which, although with elegance and sophistication as well, as depending upon the spectrum of Satanists. But different levels you can appreciate. However, they were looking at the philosophy, and it was nothing that they expected. And I actually made a little sort of a little lecture that day, unexpected lecture, because everyone's pretty much mostly familiar with the major religions. However, here you had an actual satanic publication and actual Satanist in class, as it were. And they said, "Please tell us more about it." It's pretty funny how the herd treats Satanists sometimes. It's almost like oh look, it's like Bigfoot, the elusive Satanist, at least the ones that are out about it. So it was quite amusing, actually.
Yeah, I generally find people take one of two approaches there, and it's sort of that fight or flight perspective. It's so rare that you get people that are actually in opposition but interested in hearing a different perspective. And I don't ever really look at it, but it's always a gem when you do end up finding it. But yeah, I mean, usually people see you as just a complete liar. They won't believe anything you say. They only believe what they heard somewhere else, or they see you as like this special pet that they want to take home and latch on to you. And look, I've got a satanic friend, and stuff like that.
All of which can be used to one's advantage.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let them think what they want to think, as long as your purposes are fulfilled.
Yeah, and making sure that you go into it with a purpose. That's identify shit like that, right off the bat.
Self-realization.
Yeah, absolutely. So publishing The Devil's Diary, I would imagine, you do only do it twice a year, but still there's a lot that goes into any publication.
Absolutely.
I don't know, can you maybe walk us through a brief process of publishing The Devil's Diary? What are some of the hurdles that you have to overcome that over the years you've sort of worked the kinks out of?
Yeah, the first version of The Devil's Diary, which was basically lasted up until 8 or 9 issues, that was mostly done with traditional publishers out here. You take your finished product, almost like in the quote old-fashioned way by placing a collage of what you have in your mind, what you want it to look like, and then taking it to the printers, and hopefully they will be competent enough to create it for you without any terrible mistakes. So the first version was taking it out to establishments, and that eventually, with the progression of technology and the access of hardware, better hardware, so that slowly began to move more and more online exclusively, until then, of course, online publishers came on, and they could do basically everything that was being done before, perhaps a little better, and you have more control over it. So that was moved on to, and so now people can just basically order straight from those publishers, instead of having to have 2 or 3 different ways until their order is finalized. So, but what goes into it is basically the collection of what somebody what those that will participate will contribute. You put out a note out there that you will you're thinking of putting together a next one, and who wants to be part of it. And usually that arrives, you get this influx within the next 2 or 3 weeks, and up until your deadline date. And then usually around Halloween, around Walpurgisnacht, you get it in there, perhaps sending out a copy towards favored publishers and other publications of note to have it reviewed. And sometimes the reviews come in before you publish them, if you want to put out pre-copies.
Yeah.
And so you get a certain amount of feedback, and it's usually quite positive. And so you put it forward, and then it just builds from there.
What's the lead time that you start requesting content?
All the time, actually. It's at any time of the year, someone can send a submission. However, there are deadlines. Usually for Halloween, it's about October 13th. The deadline for Walpurgisnacht is usually about March, around March, or the spring. But basically, that gives it enough time, usually.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, I would always imagine. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why this isn't really my forte of trying to put together a publication, but I would imagine that it would be pretty hectic trying to collect that many different varied, and then edit everything too. I mean, not only waiting for people to submit it.
Absolutely, it can be, especially when you have all these other things happening, besides that in your life.
Yeah.
I had relocated here last year, and it was, right around Halloween. It was a very tight schedule, and I knew that I wanted to get something out there, and the show must go on, as it were. So I basically put that one together in about 3 days.
Whoa!
It had accumulated, so it was basically I put my will to it, and I basically sat down and needed to take care of it, and gratefully it managed.
Nice. So, like a parent being asked which child is their favorite, you have to say all of them. But let's say one section in the Devil's Diary resonates a little louder with you. What section would that be?
As far as the essays are concerned, it would have to be more so the essays that are just the distilled thoughts, pure satanic thought placed out there. Overall, I must say, though, this recent interview with Magus Gilmore was fantastic, conducted by Warlock Pure Instinct.
Yeah.
And it was a great inclusion. I've always wanted that to be part of the Devil's Diary. I try to get an interview per issue. So this was fantastic, as well as Warlock Zoth Amag is in there from another musician's perspective. Mm-hmm. But basically, I'd have to say, number one, the essays, number two, the interviews.
Nice. Do you ever find yourself, when putting this together, you have more of one or the other? Do you try to keep some sort of equal ratio, or are you pretty much just whatever you have available in a finished form you're willing to put in there?
Oh, it mostly comes out to whatever is available by the time that the due date comes forth. Yeah. And that's what makes really every issue very unique, in that you never know what to expect. So you basically find out the totality of what's available in there by the say when it's listed on the news page, when it's released, because sometimes even during the deadline date, you have other things that are still filtering in, and which could work, and perhaps could supplement what may not have been as filled out before. So it all depends.
Do you ever find yourself returning work, asking for further refinements or corrections?
Oh, there have been definitely a couple of instances where you had either poetry or so-called essays that were submitted by devil worship types who had absolutely no concept of what Satanists are, and so I tend to not answer them because why waste time on them.
Yeah.
But maybe they may or may not eventually come to realize why they were not included, or perhaps they'll just go off in a huff. But whatever the case may be, this is intended for to distill and to distribute satanic thought and expression in all realms, and not as a veritable graffiti wall for people's unconcentrated delusions.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like do you ever receive something and you're not sure which side of the fence it lays on? It's just vague enough that you're just like, well, I could include it, but it's not. I mean, is it ever a burden, sort of being the defining force for your publication on what is Satanism or what is satanic and what is not?
Well, I think part of my personal stratification process is seeing whether or not it's valuable on some sort, in some way. Say, if it's kind of fictional or fantastical, is it good enough to be entertaining? If it's more so on the analytical side, is there some really good educational information in there? And of course, if it's both, then that's very much Doctor's style. It's very amusing as well as filled with undefiled wisdom. So you tend to. It's been said you tend to retain more, and I agree with that. If you combine the imagination, the left and the right hemispheres, you combine those together, of course, and then you get a third sight perspective. And so that would be the defining factor, whether or not it's valuable on some level. If it's if it's not, then just forget it.
Yeah, trash it. Okay, so where can people pick up The Devil's Diary? What's the best place they can go? Shadamantium?
The Shadamantium will lead them to two different methods to collect them. There is a link to The Devil's Diary as well as a link to the Lulu publisher. And so either way, I mean, it's probably quicker through Lulu, actually. And
So, I'm sorry.
Basically, D. Blackthorne in the Lulu store, you can just type in the name and it'll pop up. But
Nice.
usually I post links directly to the store they're on.
So, are the past issues available still?
Several are. That's an incremental process. Whenever there is time, all of them will eventually be available. But for now, most of them are. Yes.
Did you ever think about doing sort of a, I don't know, like a compendium, like maybe 1 year you release, both of them at the same, like 1 year's worth at a time, or 5 years worth at a time, or anything like that?
Well, as a matter of fact, I do have a compendium. It's called The Devil's Diaries, and I didn't put the magazines out in their original form. Like I said, that will be an incremental process, but in the time being, all of the content is available in this compendium.
Nice.
So The Devil's Diaries, that includes about a little bit over 50 essays, as well as interviews from all the magazines, from 1 all the way up to 7, I believe. And so it's all there. Whatever you missed, you need not miss it.
That's great. Yeah, I was a little bit unclear about what all it entailed, but oh my gosh.
As well
That's
as
a
the
lot of content.
yes. And the covers, all the covers are available, in that book as well.
That's great. Do you offer it as like PDFs or anything like that as well?
No, not thus far. I have been slowly been including ebooks
Nice.
for a little bit, less expensive for those so inclined. But I decided to put that forth, and eventually, probably the Devil's Diaries will reach that point. I see this increasing need for people to have everything, right in their pocket. So, why not? Wherever you are. Although I personally like the feel of a book in an apt environment, and to create this wonderful reading experience. But if you have a hectic schedule, then that option definitely is available.
Yeah, I'm certainly of the mind that if I'm, for example, waiting on my tires to be rotated or something like that, and I have a little bit of time, I love to just be able to sit down with my phone or something and read an ebook. Even if it's only a paragraph. If it's something like an essay, that's perfect format for, just you're sitting in a doctor's office waiting for the dentist to call on your name, or, just something like that where you just have a short little brief moment of time and you can just digest some satanic inspired thought. It would be perfect for that. So I certainly hope you'll consider putting the Devil's Diaries out on that.
I definitely will, and I probably I probably will, actually, yes.
That would be great. Okay, well, thank you so much. You've given me a lot of your time, and I really do appreciate it. Is there anything you would like to talk about or promote to the 9Sense audience before we wrap this baby up?
Well, the next project I'm working on, it has become a relatively a tradition, probably will continue, is the publication of the Shadow Gallery calendar, which has a lot of poetry in the artwork that I put out. However, I do take submissions for those who wish. And that's going to be available hopefully around the solstice. And but beyond that, the possibility of another Narrations from the Abyss CD, which were me narrating various essays, as well as, and of course, Devil's Diaries, constant. Mm-hmm. And perhaps eventually an art book.
Oh, wow.
Because there's a lot of content that's over 150 images plus, and some that are not even that are put out there that seems to be people get a kick out of it.
Yeah.
So I'll just go ahead and put that out.
Well, might as well. If people are interested, and you're comfortable with putting it out there, there's no reason not to. Thank you again, Draconis, and I hope we can talk again maybe in the future on another project that gets released, or maybe the calendar that you're going to be releasing sometime around solstice. We can bring you on and talk about it or something.
My pleasure, Adam.
All right, and until then, hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
I'm beginning to think that I'm never going to get to that Bizarre the Bizarre, because every time I think the show is going to allow it, we just run over at great length. And there's nothing wrong with that. That was a really great interview, and I didn't want to cut it short. So I didn't. It's really that simple. And that's going to be it for yet another show. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, next week, next week, it is the holidays, and it is the horrific holiday special from 9Sense. So tune in if you have the time. I'd love to hear from you. Visit the website 9sensepodcast.com and send your correspondence to info@9sensepodcast.com. Let me know of any suggestions, critiques, corrections, or general comments you might have. You can visit the SatanNet, Facebook, Google+, Twitter, and MySpace page for 9Sense and get updated on weekly topics. Listen to the show at RadioFreeSatan.com or download the show Monday nights via my RSS feed found at 9sensepodcast.com. You can also subscribe via iTunes by searching 9Sense, and don't forget to leave a rating or comment. If you'd like to learn more about the Church of Satan, visit churchofsatan.com. And if you'd like to hear other fine satanic voices, music, or personalities, visit Radio Free Satan, an online streaming radio station. And once again, thank you for joining me, and as always, I'm your host, Adam Campbell, and until next week, Hail Satan!